Hello art friends, my name is Anoosha Syed and I am a professional children's book illustrator and character designer for animation. I've been working as an award-winning illustrator for 6 years and I've illustrated over 20 picture books and covers and board books with some of the top publishers in the world, including HarperCollins, Simon & Schuster, and Penguin Random House. And next year, my author illustrator debut is coming out, which is super exciting. The book is called That's Not My Name, and I just can't believe it. But anyway, I have a lot of people who are interested in becoming a picture book artist like myself, asking me what are the steps you take to illustrate books for a living. And I also have people who have been trying to make this into a career for a while, but haven't really been able to find work. And they're asking me what they're doing wrong. There are a lot of things that go into becoming a successful illustrator, like business management and networking and artistic skill. But really, the most important thing you need is a good portfolio. This is the foundation of your career and is how you'll be finding work and presenting yourself to the world. And apart from it being a good portfolio with your best work, what's actually more important is that you are including work specifically designed for your target audience. In this case, that's publishing art directors and editors. You'll see what I mean in a second. In today's video, I'm going to show you guys what you need to do to create the perfect picture book portfolio that'll get you hired for work. I'll be covering what art directors are looking for, how to organize your work, a checklist of what to include, creating personal projects, and what to do if you don't have any experience yet. Also, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to my channel. I'm always posting videos on illustration advice as well as some chill studio vlogs. Now, let's get started. Creating for your target audience. So this video isn't really going to talk about how to build a website, but more so what to put in it. If you want to learn the more technical bits and the basics of creating a portfolio, I actually already made a video here which covers general portfolios and things like where to host your website and getting a domain name. I'll include a link to that video below. In that video, I also mentioned that when you're creating your portfolio, the biggest thing you need to keep in mind is that you want to create your portfolio pieces for a specific audience, as well as the area of illustration that you want to go into. Illustrators are normally commercial artists, and your portfolio is less of a website of where you show off your favorite pieces, but instead it's more of a resume that gives your potential client an idea of what you can do. From my last portfolio video, listen, you're absolutely brimming with talent, but unfortunately, we do live in a digital world now, and unless you have a website, no one will know how fantastically talented you are unless you're showing it off. Also, since all of this stuff is being done online now and you're not physically present, your portfolio is going to be doing the talking for you. So it's important that it's a strong reflection of yourself and your work. With any portfolio, you'll have better chances of finding clients if you are showcasing work that is specific to your industry and catered directly to your preferred clients. Since your portfolio is going to be like a job interview, we want to prove to the client that we can handle the work they assign to us. If you don't have relevant work in your portfolio, the client might not think that you have the capability to create it, and they might pass you over for someone else who clearly does. For example, if you mostly draw horror and gore and your portfolio is full of like R-rated artwork, but you really want to work on children's picture books, you will have a tough time finding clients because you don't have child-friendly artwork in your portfolio. Okay, that is a more extreme example, but it can be more subtle than that. A main problem I see with a lot of newer artists is that they have a lot of cute artwork in their portfolio. Things like cute girls on plain backgrounds. I'm not shading anyone, I'm talking about myself as a new artist. There is artistic ability there, but again, they're not putting those skills into publishing related projects. An art director will look at that portfolio and see that you can draw well, but they have no clue if you can tackle spreads and spots and covers, or whether or not you can handle perspective and composition. So, okay, maybe you actually know how to do all of that stuff, but the client doesn't know that you know. And again, if you don't have relevant examples, a client is going to hesitate to hire you because they don't want to take the risk. So when building the perfect publishing portfolio, we are going to be catering it directly to our audience, that being art directors and editors at publishing houses, or literary and illustration agents if you are looking for representation. In publishing illustration, there are generally 4 different subsections, I guess, that you can go into. Picture books and board books, chapter books, covers, and non-fiction books. Okay, in your portfolio, you could choose to include examples from all of these categories. Obviously, the more versatile your skills are, the easier it will be to find work, because obviously you'll be open to more opportunities. But don't feel like you need to force yourself to do all of them. If there's one area in publishing that you really like, then just focus all of your energy on that. Remember, you only want to put in your very best work into your portfolio. You'll always be judged by your worst piece, so be critical of your work. Less is always more, and it's better to have 5 excellent pieces than 20 that are kind of all over the place. So like I said, you could fill your portfolio with all 4 of the categories that I mentioned, but if you feel like your chapter book illustrations aren't that strong, then just skip it. Also, don't put in work in your portfolio that you don't like doing, whether it's a style that you don't like or a style that you just don't draw in anymore. Or maybe a category that you don't like maybe you just hate doing covers. If you put that work into your portfolio, a client might see your art but hire you specifically for that piece with that style you hate, and then you end up having to do the work and just being really unhappy the whole time. I have done this in the past and I've learned not to do it again. What to include in your portfolio? If you already have past experience with publishing work, or maybe you've made some relevant projects in school and you have a couple of samples, that is great. Later in the video, I'll talk about how you can arrange all of that work. But if you don't have any previous examples, or you just want to build on what you have, we have to make some. Especially when you're starting out, creating personal projects is so important to build your perfect publishing portfolio. Kind of like fake it till you make it. You can create samples of the following: picture book and board books. Picture books are generally 32 pages long, but they can also be 24, 40, or 48. This is because the pages are printed in multiples of 8. Board books will have fewer, like 8 or 16 pages, and they're going to use those thick cardboard pages since they're designed for babies and toddlers, and they like to chew on the pages. Your average picture book is made up of 4 types of illustrations. And again, in your portfolio, you don't have to use all of them. In fact, some illustrators prefer to stick to one type. I personally love using spreads almost exclusively, but it's always good to vary just to get some interest in your book and some variety. The 4 types of art in picture books are spots. These are small illustrations that focus on characters or objects, usually without full backgrounds. They could be floating on the page or have some pretty light background elements to ground them. You can have a single spot on a page or use multiple to imply action and suspense. When illustrating a page, it can be hard to decide which part of the story to choose to illustrate, especially if there's a lot going on in the story. With multiple spots, you don't have to choose just one action to draw. If you have a lot of text, like in an early reader book, you might choose to only illustrate in spots, which is what I did for the book series Hank the Pet Sitter. Vignettes. Some people use the words spots and vignettes interchangeably. For me, the difference is that vignettes are going to look like mini scenes, kind of like spots but with defined backgrounds with pretty clear edges around them. I don't usually use vignettes in my art, but this one from Stevie Lewis is a pretty good example. Single pages. This is self-explanatory. It's an illustration that takes up a single page. On the opposite page of that spread, you could have another single page illustration, or you can choose to use spots on that page just to give a little bit of breathing room. Spreads. A spread is an illustration that takes up both pages of an open book. This is my favorite kind of page to illustrate. As I said, it's hard to figure out which action from the text to draw out, and it's especially harder when you're working on a spread. So much story can happen on just one page of text, and how do you even decide which action to choose to draw? I mean, normally you just have to figure out which action would be the most important and most appealing, but you can also draw multiple actions within a single spread. I mentioned in my I'm Perfectly Designed video, since we as Western readers view read from left to right, you can start an action on the left side of the page and progress the story forward towards the right. End papers. This isn't something you actually need in your portfolio, but it could be a fun exercise. This is that extra spread at the beginning of the book as well as the end, and usually this looks like a pattern related to the theme of the book. Chapter books. Chapter books are books with chapters for an older audience who can actually read, going from early readers all the way up to middle grade. You will usually see spots and single-page illustrations in chapter books, as well as an illustrated cover. Chapter books for kids are going to have way more illustrations than books for middle grade. For kids, you might see illustrations on like every other page, like with the Diary of a Wimpy Kid series, and for middle grade, you might only see an illustration on the chapter title pages, like in a series of unfortunate events. Because these illustrations are for novels, and novels are going to have specific printing and paper requirements, they will be in black and white. Sometimes you might have two-color printing where you have black and white illustrations plus one additional color. I did this for the Monster and Boy book series as well as for Bug Girl. Though the interior is going to be in grayscale, the cover will most likely be in full color. Covers. Apart from book interiors, you can also be hired to do book covers as well. Usually this will be for middle grade or young adult chapter books where it's only text inside, but they are looking for an illustrated cover. Sometimes you'll only illustrate the front cover, sometimes you'll have the front cover plus a small spot at the back, and sometimes you will do a big wrap-around cover, covering, the front and the back. Nonfiction. Okay, this is cheating. This isn't really a separate category because you'll find spots and spreads as well in nonfiction books, but I think these projects do require a different type of skill set because it involves a lot of research and attention to detail, since you might be illustrating people from real life and scientific subjects. I would also put editorial projects under this nonfiction category as well as activity pages and for children's magazines and so on. Like I said, you could choose to have examples of all of these categories or stick to just one or two depending on your strengths. The best way to showcase this is through projects instead of individual illustrations. I mean, okay, I guess potentially you could have a random spread about one story, maybe a spot of an entirely different concept, and then one cover of something completely different. Like, okay, I guess you could do that. But it feels a lot more cohesive if you create a dedicated project. If you don't have prior work examples, we have to make some personal projects. Personal projects. I had someone ask me once if making personal projects is cheating. Like, oh, what if it looks like I'm lying about this project, it's not actually published, no one really hired me to draw this book, I mean, it doesn't count, right? But it absolutely does. When you're starting out, most likely the bulk of your portfolio is going to be self-guided projects, either ones that you did in school or self-initiated ones you start in your own free time. Even established professionals do it all the time, especially if they want to branch out into another field or just update for a new style. For example, I consider myself to be a professional children's book illustrator, but I don't have that much experience in activity books, for example, things that include puzzles and games. If I want to attract the attention of an art director and show them that, hey, I want to work on activity books and I want to be hired for it, then I have to make some activity pages in my free time to expand my portfolio. I have mentioned countless times in the past that you should not work for free. Maybe a client comes to you offering a picture book project where they're paying you dirt cheap or exposure, and you might consider taking it on so that at least you'll gain some experience and then end up with work for your portfolio. But instead of taking on that unpaid work, you can spend that same amount of time working on personal projects. So you'll still end up with a portfolio piece, but this way you will also have full creative control and create work specifically for your target audience and your career goals. For your personal project concept, you don't have to use an original idea. An original idea is great if you have a lot of inspiration already and you want to have full creative control. And also if you want to eventually try to pitch it to publishers and get it published. But creating an original story concept is obviously a lot of hard work on top of illustrating. And some illustrators don't want to write, they just want to draw. So it's perfectly acceptable to use existing story ideas as well. This will save time in coming up with ideas and writing, and also give you a foundation to start off with. There's also the added bonus that people who will look at your project won't need any background information on the story. They know exactly what Cinderella is and can immediately understand your work without needing any context. Okay, I'm going to list out some personal project ideas that you could try to use in your portfolio. A little bit of inspiration to get you started. Illustrating a fairy tale or any public domain novel that people are familiar with, like Sherlock Holmes, Sleeping Beauty, Oliver Twist, and so on. Illustrating a well-known story, but putting a spin on it, like changing the setting or time period. Maybe a retelling of The Wizard of Oz, but everyone is a cat. Or Little Red Riding Hood, but it takes place in Australia and it's steampunk for some reason. Redesigning the cover of a favorite book of yours. If you have a book that you really love, old or new, you could redesign the cover. This could be a really fun exercise, especially if the original cover wasn't illustrated. You could have a lot of fun with the typography as well. Illustrate a folk tale or a myth from your own culture or one that you're really interested in. Just make sure you do the research, please. If you want to focus on character design, you could design a character and dedicate a whole design packet for them. This could include elements like a turnaround where you draw your character in different angles, a page of expressions, costume options, and poses. You could choose a historical figure and draw some scenes based on important moments in their lives. Choose a subject that you're really fascinated about, whether it's geology or a certain animal, history, and so on. Create some illustrations based on that subject and do your research to make details as accurate as possible. It could be helpful to search for lesson plans for that subject, like Googling third grade solar system lesson plan and trying to illustrate elements from that class, kind of like if you were illustrating a textbook. Taking some song lyrics and arranging it into a picture book format and trying to illustrate a story out of it. This could be especially fun and challenging if the song that you chose is kind of like metaphorical. That could be kind of fun. Illustrating the alphabet but following a specific theme, like animals or cities, and trying to incorporate that in each letter. Design an activity page. This could be a puzzle like a word match, a brain teaser, a guess the difference, and so on. You can look at children's magazines and activity books for inspiration, especially on how to format your pages. Illustrating words, similar to a children's encyclopedia or those My First Words books. You know, things like opposites and shapes and actions. If you want to illustrate an original concept but are stuck on ideas, there are a lot of prompts out there that you can use. So I know of Color Collective and Animal Alphabets on Twitter and Good Ship Illustration. I think they're on Instagram. They all have fun weekly challenges with the perks that you can share your work on their hashtag to gain an audience as well. So for these personal projects, I wouldn't draw the whole book out. I mean, 32 pages is quite a lot, even if you were planning on submitting it to publishers. Most of the examples I just mentioned use text that belongs to the original writer, but even apart from that, with these personal projects, you really only need to do maybe 3 to 6 illustrations and maybe a cover. That'll give enough of an idea to the publisher on what you can create with a single concept. And then I would have 4 of these portfolio projects in your portfolio to start with. Arranging your portfolio. So in my last portfolio video, I mentioned that navigating your website should be super easy for your viewers. Basically, you want to make it as easy as possible for art directors to find your work, navigate through it, and most importantly, be able to contact you. I see this a lot when I want to refer another artist for a job that I can't take on, but I can't find their contact information on their website. You want to make contacting you super easy, and if it's too difficult, a client might not put in the effort and will pass on you. Have a contact page and make your email address super clear. If you have an agent, include their contact information as well. And as for navigation, make sure all of your links are working properly, that your website works on both web and mobile, and that you can easily go back to main menus and you won't get stuck on any pages, because I've had that happen before and it's so frustrating. So there are a lot of ways that you can arrange your portfolio. In terms of website setup, you can do thumbnails, endless scrolling, horizontal scrolling, blog posts, and so on. What I personally would avoid is having a single page on your website with all of your work on it. I know some illustrators like to use this format, and for some people it totally works. But personally, I find it kind of messy and confusing since all of your work is jumbled up in one place, and it's extra confusing if you have a bunch of different styles. And if you have endless scrolling on top of that, well, you have to keep scrolling to find the work you're looking for. And that's also kind of confusing. So the single page format is fine for people who do single image illustrations. But publishing art tends to be project-based and will have a lot of images within each project. Personally, I love having subsections on my website. It makes it a lot easier to navigate and find what you're looking for. Each project in your portfolio will have its own dedicated page where you can include all of your relevant spreads and covers and project information. And then you can either have like a thumbnail or the project title leading to that page. If you have worked on a bunch of covers, you could classify it as one section and then put all of your covers on that page, or you could have a separate page for each of them. If you have a lot of work in your portfolio, then you could actually further categorize your work in categories. You could create categories based on style or by subject matter. For example, having 3 categories in your portfolio, one for black and white chapter book art, one for picture books, and one for covers. And for anything that falls outside of that, could either go in a category called illustration, personal art, or sketches. So with style, I've mentioned before that it's totally fine if you work in a variety of different styles and you want to showcase them all in your portfolio. But if you have them all on one page, it might look cluttered. So we can fix this by arranging your portfolio neatly. Art directors and clients won't get confused if you have different styles. I mean, they understand that artists have range and they can work in a variety of different styles, but they want to make sure you have different styles intentionally. If the style of your work is all over the place, it could accidentally give the impression that you can't be consistent with your work. And consistency is an important part of a long-form project, like a picture book. To solve this, you could separate your different styles into different categories. For example, in my portfolio, I've created categories based on industry, because my style tends to change depending on which type of client I'm working for. I have a category in my portfolio for books, one for visual development, and one for general illustration. This way, when I'm sending over my work to clients, I can also send them directly to the relevant category, depending on who it is. This is really useful if you have a wide skill set, like maybe sectioning your work out into illustration, hand lettering, and comics. Or maybe you could categorize by style and create a section dedicated for black and white, one for realism, and then one for cartooning. I wouldn't recommend having more than 4 of these categories though. However, if you work in completely different industries with completely different styles like photography, graphic design, and illustration, it might be better to just create entirely different separate portfolios. And while we're on the subject, again, it's totally fine if you work in multiple styles. It's true that a lot of illustrators find success specifically because they have a very unique style and voice, but flexibility also comes in handy. With multiple styles, you might be able to find more work opportunities, and if you're good at adapting and imitating other people's styles, there's actually a whole market for that as well. Working for IP projects, for example, where you would have to change your style to fit with the IP. Like let's say a My Little Pony picture book, where the art would have to be on model with the show's designs. Project pages. When setting up your dedicated page for your publishing project, I would include at minimum the following. your book cover, though I guess you could skip this if you used it as your thumbnail image already, and 3 to 6 illustrations from the book. Even for a book that I fully illustrated, I prefer to stick to just a few of my favorite pieces so the page doesn't get too busy. However, there are so many more things you can add onto this page. Here's another list. A description of the project. This would be the title, a summary of the book, when the book came out, who the author is, the publisher, and the art director. If this was a personal project, you would also mention that here. A link to where you can buy or pre-order the book. Any praise for the book or quotes, especially if you have received any starred reviews like from Kirkus. Any awards your book has won or features in publications, including detailed shots. If you have a single illustration, like a cover or maybe a super complex illustration from a book, you could include a crop or several crops to show more detail and also fill up the page a little bit. Sharing additional illustrations like title pages and end papers. Sharing your process. It's not required, but it can be a fun insight for people looking at your art and will give a better understanding of how you work and come up with concepts. So for progress, you could include thumbnails, sketches, character design, and color roughs. You could also include text describing your process, kind of like a blog post. But again, that is totally optional. If you choose to share progress work, I would put it at the end of the page so your clients can see your finished work first. Include visualizations of your work. It's always nice seeing what the finished project would look like. So if your project has been published, you can include photographs of the finished book. I think it looks really cool and it makes the project just feel more real. If it's a personal project and it hasn't been published, you could always Photoshop it to look like it has been printed. There are a lot of mock-ups you can find online that will make your work look like it has been printed already, like things on mugs and t-shirts, and more importantly for us, like a book. I like to include these visualizations because it gives the art director a clear vision of what your art would look like in the real world. Publishing checklist. So I'm going to share a little checklist with you guys on the kind of stuff you should have in a picture book portfolio. With children's books, there are certain subjects that art directors will look out for because they come up so often in these types of projects. And you want to show publishers that you are able to handle them if it shows up in a manuscript. However, if you don't have these in your portfolio or aren't good at drawing them, that is totally okay. This isn't like a definitive list. Everyone has their strengths and weaknesses, and I've already mentioned that you only want to include your best work in this portfolio, and some people just have their preferences. I love drawing kids, but I hate drawing cars. Some people love drawing lush backgrounds, and some people prefer to keep it minimal. If you don't want to draw something, then just don't. I'll just list this out in the order of most to least important. Most meaning stuff that shows up all the time in books and that you could try to improve on and include in your portfolio. And least meaning stuff that is optional and would be fun to include. Kids. This is like absolute basic stuff. If you are illustrating picture books, 99% of the time you will be drawing children. You need to be able to draw kids well, and also be able to draw kids of different ages, from babies to toddlers to kids. If you're interested in book covers for middle grade and young adult, then you also need to be able to draw tweens and teens as well. And it should be clear what age these kids are when you look at them. If you have two characters side by side, one who is 4 years old and one who is 7, you should immediately be able to tell the difference between them. You know, like from their height, how much baby fat they have, even their mannerisms. Also, this is true for any character, but also make sure you have variety in your designs and aren't getting stuck in same face syndrome where all of your characters end up looking pretty similar, especially if you get rid of their hair and clothes. Study real kids. See what they look like, what they're into, what they're wearing these days, and so on. For good kid design, I like to see characters where when you look at them, you're immediately reminded of a kid you know in real life. There's just like a real quality to them, whether it's like mismatched socks, a missing tooth, glasses that are too big and kind of crooked on them, or a dimple on one cheek. I think that for appealing character design, the goal is to create something believable. And studying real kids around you and picking up on their quirks and mannerisms is a really good way to learn from it. Adults and families. Apart from kids, you'll also be drawing adults. Most likely other family members like parents and grandparents, but just people in general that a kid would see in day-to-day life. You know, things like teachers, postal workers, same thing. Make sure you have variety in your designs. Storytelling. When creating any pieces in your portfolio, as an illustrator, your main goal is to create art that tells a story. I believe that is the difference between illustration and fine art. Even if it's just a single character, what is this trying to tell us? What is the story behind it? Especially as a children's book illustrator, you want to create as much story as possible in your artwork. The fact is, most of your target audience can't read. Their parents read the books out loud to them, but I remember as a kid, I loved just looking at the artwork and imagining my own stories and noticing all of the small details. A simple spot like this can have a story that you could build in your mind. Where are they going? Who made the snacks and who is it for? They look like they're excited to go to an event. Maybe it's a party. Just try to keep that in mind when you illustrate your pieces. Characters in action. So it isn't enough to only draw characters who are like standing perfectly straight looking right at the viewer. Art directors will want to see that you can bring life to your characters. So in your spreads and spots, have your characters in action. Kids who are playing and running, doing hobbies and just being kids. Have examples where characters are using props and, more importantly, interacting with other characters. Hugging and playing, etc. You want to create real characters, and action is a great way to do it. Again, study kids in real life and see how they behave. This also means showing different emotions as well, like happy, sad, sleepy, angry. Just give these kids some range. Animals. Okay, apparently 27% of main characters in picture books in 2018 were animals, so this was a pretty big market to tap into. Like I said, some people are really, really good at drawing animals and some aren't. So if this isn't your strong suit, that's okay. But it would be good to try to include some animals if you're able to. Specifically pets like dogs and cats, since that's more common in human-based picture books. You can also include more tropical animals and dinosaurs, or even mythical creatures like dragons and unicorns and mermaids and monsters. Are mermaids animals? I'm not sure. These animals could be anthropomorphic or not. Inclusive characters. Okay, so remember when I said that 27% of characters in books were animals? Okay, so in that same study, 50% of characters in 2018 were white, 10% were black, 7% were Asian American and Pacific Islanders, 5% were Latinx, and 1% were indigenous. Literally more animals in picture books than kids of color, which is insane. Especially since as of 2020, children of color now make up the majority of the demographic in the United States. We have a long way to go before we see equal representation in picture books, but as illustrators, we have a lot of power in choosing what kind of characters we draw in our books. We have the responsibility to create works that are inclusive and represent children from all types of backgrounds. Different races, body types, families, socioeconomic backgrounds, religions, disabilities, and so on. Just kids that exist in our world. I know some artists are worried about drawing kids outside of their race, and I would really encourage you guys to practice in your free time. Study how to color different hair textures and skin tones, especially dark skin. Be mindful of stereotypes and shorthands in your designs. There are a lot of resources out there for drawing inclusive characters, especially on Twitter and Instagram. I'll include one or two below, but definitely do your research, and as always, draw from life. Backgrounds. Draw your characters in backgrounds and also interacting with background elements. You could have examples of interiors like bedrooms and classrooms, and then you can also draw exteriors like cities and forests and beaches. Draw your backgrounds in different times of day, seasons, and weather. Color and light. This will largely depend on your coloring style, but you could try to illustrate illustrations with interesting color palettes and lighting situations. Maybe illustrate a piece with limited color palette or a room with cool lighting. Try to create mood using color and light. Trends. You can also capitalize on popular subjects in the publishing industry. See what kind of books are being published these days and see if there are any recurring trends. For example, for a while, books about unicorns were everywhere. Like, they were really popular, and you'd see new books about unicorns all the time. And obviously, this means that there is a really big market for it right now. See what's popular and try to include examples in your portfolio. Consistency. If you are drawing the same character repeatedly, which is probably the case if you are doing a long-form project like a picture book, then make sure your characters stay on model and look the same throughout the book, from different angles and when they're doing different poses and emotions. Black and white art. If you have a full color portfolio, you could include a section specifically for black and white pieces that could work for chapter books if it's an area that you want to branch into. Props. This could be anything from school supplies to food to vehicles. You can draw props as is, or more preferably, characters interacting with those props. Standing out. The publishing industry is unfortunately pretty competitive, so it can really help to try to find something that sets your portfolio apart and make you stand out from the crowd. Having a unique style. This is a given. If you have a unique style, you have something that is inimitable and something only you can offer. It's a style where when you go to the bookstore, you can immediately tell who illustrated it, and they bring such a strong personal voice to whatever they create that is uniquely them. Some illustrators I can think of include Quentin Blake, John Klassen, Juana Martinez-Neal, and Christian Robinson. On the flip side, having a not so unique style also comes in handy. I don't know what to call this, not generic, maybe broadly appealing, because having a unique style doesn't guarantee work, right? Like if you're really pushing the boundaries, people will notice, but it isn't what always sells, and a large part of publishing is making books that make money. Like, this is what I consider my own style to be. I honestly don't think that my art is very unique. I mean, it makes me sad sometimes, but it is what it is. I feel like it's because I'm really strongly influenced by certain things that a lot of other artists in my field also share. Things like Disney and mid-century art and little golden books. So I don't think that with my style I'm really selling anything that's new. But on the plus side, my style is pretty appealing. I have that preschool animation background, so I know what sells. Big eyes, cute body proportions, bright colors. It's very safe and very commercial, but it sells, and so I get consistent work. If I had a more unique style, it might have been harder to find clients. With my more personal work, I do have a more unique style, and when I do try to present that to my publishing clients, they'll usually be like, "Oh, that's cool, but could we get this? Could we get this one instead? The one that's more generic." But yeah, it is what it is. Working with different mediums is another way to stand out. Apart from traditional paints and digital art, there are a lot of illustrators out there who have made a little niche for themselves with a really unique style using specific tools. Andy Harkness's book Wolf Boy is created entirely out of clay, where he uses dough to sculpt out his characters and scenes and then color them digitally after. If you have the skills, you could use embroidery in your publishing works, like Jillian Tamaki, Chloe Giordano, and Ashley Wong. Sabina Gibson is a textile artist who creates the cutest toys for her picture books, and I know there are a lot of paper cut artists out there as well. Basically, if you already have an interesting skill, use it to your advantage and try incorporating it into your portfolio. If you have any strong skills, really milk it. If you have a typography background, for example, and really like hand lettering and calligraphy, make any excuse to use it, like creating type for book covers. It's a really handy skill to have that not a lot of artists can do, so show it off. Again, because I'm a character designer, that is my strong suit, and so I put a really strong emphasis on my character designs in my artwork and my portfolio. If you're really good at drawing backgrounds, or maybe you love drawing plants, then definitely create personal projects that follow that theme. If you're really passionate about something, then let it show. It's a great way to make a niche for yourself and be known for a specific topic. For example, you just really love drawing trains. You're not really good at drawing anything else, but gosh dang it, you can really draw a train. Your portfolio is just full of trains, and an art director might look at that and think, wow, this guy really loves trains. I have a book project about trains that they would be perfect for. I mean, okay, this is a really specific example, but I've seen it happen a lot. My friend Kaylee Bales would post literary fan art all the time, stuff like Jane Eyre and Charlotte Bronte, and eventually she was hired to illustrate a book all about female writers in history. Another friend, Faith Schaffer, would draw these really cool sword-fighting ladies in armor, and because they just love drawing that kind of stuff, they were then hired to illustrate a book about female samurais. This also goes for fan art. You might have seen Gabrielle Piccolo's Teen Titans fan art online before. Stuff like this and this and this. And you might already know that he was later hired to illustrate a best-selling graphic novel series about Beast Boy and Raven because of his fan art series. For my own example, a couple of years ago when I first started in my career, I illustrated a Disney princess modern whatever series that got kind of viral, and then because of that I was contacted by Disney to illustrate a chapter book series based on the Disney princesses. Fan art does get you work. If you are obsessed about a topic, wow, it works. So yeah, if you are weirdly obsessed about a very specific topic and known for drawing it all the time, then lean into it. Basically, you want to create a little niche for yourself, something that you are known for, whether it's a skill set, a style, or a subject you're passionate about. An art director will totally see that passion for the subject and then remember you when a similar project comes their way and they're looking to hire someone. Things to note. If you are designing your personal project, you will have to decide whether or not you want to have text included in your art. For covers, it would be a good idea to include the title and the credit, and then maybe include a version that's artwork only. For picture book projects, there are pros and cons to including text on your pages. If you include text, it does make it more clear that it's for a publishing project, and it ties the whole page together. But without text, you can focus solely on the art without being distracted by text. And if you don't have strong graphic design skills and are placing the text by yourself, if the typography is badly done, it'll bring down the entire spread and make it look really unprofessional. I think both options are fine. I have used text and no text throughout my portfolio. But one thing to note is that even if you aren't going to include text onto your spreads, you absolutely need to design your spreads as if you were. When planning your spreads, it's extremely important to plan for text placement as well. You want to illustrate your page in a way where the text doesn't feel like it's being forced into the page awkwardly, but more like it naturally feels part of the illustration and that the art kind of frames around it. The art and the story should be a partnership that complement each other. You can leave natural gaps in your art for the text, have a little spot art framing it on the corners, and I really recommend looking at published picture books for ideas on how to place text. This is a big part of the job and something an art director might be looking out for. And so even if you aren't including text in your portfolio, if someone looks at your spread, they can clearly guess where the text would have gone. So we've already established that the publishing industry is pretty white and heteronormative. But in recent years, the industry is slowly improving, and now there has been a bigger push to publish works from more diverse writers, and similarly to also hire diverse artists to illustrate those stories authentically. Let's cash in on that, shall we? If you are a marginalized creator, like a person of color or queer for example, you could create art inspired by your identity for your portfolio. For example, I am a female Pakistani Muslim illustrator, and I have work in my portfolio with similar themes related to my identity. You know, lots of cute brown girls in shalwar kameez. Because of my portfolio, I will very frequently get offers to work on books with South Asian characters in them, so that the book can be more accurate and authentic to the culture. Apart from showing your best work in your portfolio, it's also the place where you can truly share your voice and what makes your art uniquely you. So yeah, in your personal project, you could choose to illustrate a topic that highlights your identity and the perspective you bring to it. For example, I could have done a retelling of Cinderella that takes place in South Asia, or maybe illustrate a biography of famous Muslim women in history, or even do a focus on patterns and motifs from the area. Basically, telling art directors, hey, this is me, this is my life, hire me for books because I know what I'm talking about and I'm an expert on my lived experiences. However, like I mentioned in my How I Got a Book Deal video, there are downsides to own voices work. I've heard a lot of valid complaints from marginalized artists who feel like they only get contacted to work on projects based on their identity. Like for me, in 2019, 99% of the work I was contacted for were based on South Asian stories. And while I love who I am, there's still more to me than my background, and I wish I could just work on fun books about dinosaurs and rockets instead of a bunch of pretty heavy books on racism. I also feel a little weird and conflicted that I'm like milking my culture to get jobs, but also feel like I gotta do whatever I can in this industry. I don't know. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, and I go more in depth on my feelings about it in my book deal video. But anyway, if you do like to draw inspiration from your identity, this can be a good way to find work. And finally, everything I've said in this video is totally subjective. Every art director's taste is different, and every illustrator's journey is unique as well. You could follow 0 of my tips and only draw adults in your portfolio and not care about text placement, but still end up finding work as a picture book illustrator. So please don't take my tips as strict rules. My advice in this video is a basic guideline on what a well-rounded publishing portfolio would look like, but at the end of the day, just draw whatever you want. And that's it! A powerful presentation for people pursuing publishing on preparing and planning your perfect picture book portfolio. I hope that this guide has been helpful for you guys, and as always, if you have any questions, just let me know in the comments below and I will try to get to them. And also, let me know who your favorite publishing illustrators are. I'm always on the lookout for some new artists. As I've mentioned before, if you need more information on building a portfolio website, I have made a separate video, this one, which I'll link to below. And if you're interested in buying my debut picture book, That's Not My Name, I will also leave a pre-order link below. And thank you if you do. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram. I am at foxville_art, and I usually post all of my updates over there. My portfolio website is anooshasyed.com, where you can also find my online store. If you haven't already, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to my channel. These videos are a labor of love, and I really appreciate your support as always. And I think that's pretty much it. I hope you have a great day and make lots and lots of money. Bye guys!